Okay, the subject I would like to talk to us about is the subject of discipleship. I want us to we're going to talk about discipleship and how does that fit into your church, okay? Now, I want to make something very clear up front. I'm not here to give you a simple 3-step plan that if you follow my plan, it's going to revolutionize your church. As a matter of fact, I have no idea how what I'm going to present to you should be applied in your context. If I were to dream of wild success, my dream would be to come out of these meetings with maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of you making a commitment to piloting what we're going to talk about. As a matter of fact, I have the expectation that some of you are going to say, this will just not work in my context. Okay? That's my expectation, that many of you will not want to implement what we talk about. You're just going to say, that's not me, that's not my ministry, it doesn't fit, it's not going to work. That's fine. I'm not here to say this is the best thing. It's not, this is going to solve all your problems. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to share with you will probably make your life more miserable. It's probably going to create more work for you if you do what I'm proposing for you to do. Okay. So having said that, on the other hand, this is what I want to share with you is probably one of the most exciting things that I'm thinking about and struggling with and wrestling with in ministry, period. It's actually revolutionary, and often revolutionary thinking is just that, a different way of thinking about ministry. So for instance, let me just throw this out at you. Let me ask you a question. What is your church budget? I just had this conversation with Jaco on the way in. What is your church budget? Someone share with me, what is the monthly income of offerings in your church? Someone throw out a number. Yes?
Around about
30,000?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other one is about 37, 30.
So between 2 churches, about 60,000. Okay. So here's the thinking that I'm wanting to challenge you with, okay? Between 2 churches in one place, just on average, about 60,000 is the church operating budget. And I want to say that's rubbish. It's not. As a matter of fact, that represents possibly 2 to 5% of your church's budget. Do you know why? Most members only give 2 to 5% of their total income to your church operating budget. Are you with me? The church budget is not what people give in the offering plate, it's what they earn. Are you with me? Are you with me? 100% of a Christian's income is mission income. Right? That's what we give lip service to stewardship. It's like, okay, this is all God's money, etc., etc., etc. But then when we count the church budget, all we're counting is 2% that people give. So my suggestion, what I want to challenge us to think with, is that the center of the church is not in the building, it's in the world. That's from God's perspective. And so how do we start thinking about discipleship and equipping and empowering so we have a go model rather than a come model? Are you with me? Okay. All right. So that's a simple paradigm. Now, there's several things that I want to do with you. I want to establish a theological foundation for the mission of God. What is God's mission? What is He about? What is the thing that God can do? What's the thing that only He can do? Okay, we want to establish a theological foundation for that. Secondly, we want to look at how do we go from a lost person to a disciple-making movement. What are the steps? We talked about that. We introduced that idea when I was here last time. And then the third thing is I want to explore some very practical principles and then my goal, my dream is that by the time we're done, you will be able to take those principles and say, how would I apply them in my context, if I'm going to apply them? Okay? Are you with me? All right. I want to share just a couple of quotes. This is from the book Education. And rather than me reading it, because I know everyone here can read, I would like you to read this and then discuss in the group, how does this apply? How does this apply? Or what does this tell us about the mission of God for your church? Okay, what is as your responsibility as a leader? What does this say about God's mission and your responsibility to God's mission? Okay, so I want you to discuss that question in the group. So read the quote and then discuss that briefly. I want to give you 2 minutes. So what's the lesson of this quote? If you can discuss that, and I'm just going to ask for a couple of you to comment. Take a moment. What is the message in terms of describing the mission of God? Let me ask you. I'm interested in what was the focus of your discussion from this quote. How does this apply in your context as a pastor, as a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, as a Christian, and in terms of the mission of God? What does that mean? Talk to me. Yes.
We see that God's overall goal, the one she's actually talking about there, is to evangelize.
Okay.
Now that doesn't exclude your goals, but in whatever you do, you should ask, how does what I want to do fit into that larger goal? If I can give an example, many people say, I want to evangelize. And then sometimes you realize that you're conflicting with others because your goal is not really to evangelize, you want to stand in front and look important.
Yeah.
But if your goal, it's a kind of thing like, Lord, what do you want me to do, rather than I want to do this.
Excellent. So what this is saying to you is that God's goal, the primary purpose of God, is evangelism. Okay. Other things that you notice from this quote. Yes.
The first thing is, everyone that wants to do evangelism, wants to have this little aim, must be touched by Christ.
Okay, everyone who wants to do evangelism or have this aim must be touched by Christ.
That's where it starts. It's the initiative. You have to be touched by Christ.
Okay.
Then you have this definite aim.
Alright.
And it's an ever-present, as our book said, it's an ever-present aim.
This is what Christ has touched.
Yes.
Okay, so the condition, this is the prerequisite.
Yes.
Like if this hasn't happened, the rest is not going to happen, right?
Absolutely.
This is the response of everyone who Christ has touched. Good observation, beautiful. Anyone else? Yes.
I think the first line, it says success in any line demands a definite aim.
Excellent.
Under that it says that true success. I think that in churches specifically, a lot of members have success in mind as financial success.
Yes.
We can only actually have one true aim in life. All the other stuff should be periphery. So evangelism isn't, or spreading the gospel isn't our main aim. That is something that you do, but our main aim would be to be financially secure or to live a happy life or a comfortable life. And so evangelism or spreading the gospel becomes second or third or fourth or fifth priority, where this says it should be first.
Excellent. Okay, let me just ask a question. When it comes to those whose heart, everyone whose heart Christ has touched, who's responsible for helping to clarify what that aim should be?
Pastors.
Okay, I want to suggest that this is one of our primary responsibilities, right? Is to set an aim. Is to make sure that this is clear. And of course, for those whose lives Christ has not touched, this is going to be difficult. Alright? It's going to be difficult. But once Christ has really touched our life, this should be clear. And you're saying there should be a definite aim, there should be a single-minded focus. Okay? Now, let me just say, this is a law of physics. She's saying this, success in what? Any line. If you want to be successful in any direction, you actually have to set your mind on something. You have to be clear on what that thing is. And then she says what? You must keep it steadily in view. What does that mean?
Always before you.
It's going to be always before you. Like this is going to be the one thing you think about morning, noon, night. It's something you're going to discuss. It's something you're going to wrestle with. Something you're going to ask questions about. It's not going to be easy to get to, but you're going to push on and on and on until you get that goal. That's what that's talking about. And if you want to succeed in any line, you have to have that kind of focus. That's the point, right? Without that kind of focus, then what's the consequence? If you don't have that kind of focus, you're not going to have success in that line. Are you following? Okay, good. What else did you notice? Yes.
It's not necessarily the church purpose, it's a heaven-appointed purpose.
So look, there's a purpose that goes beyond my local church. It's a purpose that goes beyond the conference office, or the union, or the division. That there's a purpose that transcends the existence of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is a heaven-appointed purpose.
Yeah.
Are you following me? Now, just use logic with me. Success in any line demands a definite aim, such that he or she who would achieve true success, that's what Jesus said, true success in life must keep steadily in view the aim worthy of their endeavor. You've got to keep this steadily in view, okay? Now, this heaven-appointed purpose, if we're going to actually succeed in that, what's the implication? Yes?
Evangelism becomes a program I do because the conference expects it.
Said with true tongue-in-cheek. Okay, so the question then is, what is the single-minded thing that's the driver of your ministry? And the question then is it the heaven appointed or is it something else? And I'm not talking about the ministry as a pastor, I'm talking about ministry as a member, as someone whose heart Christ has touched. You understand? Because this is not your role as a pastor is secondary to your role as a member of the body of Christ. Following? Yes. Doing a pastor job is your job. That's your job. Just like if somebody's working at a bottle making factory, or they're working as a mechanic, that's their job. That's what gets them bread and butter. Their first work, though, is to be a member of the body of Christ. Just like you. Are you following me? Okay, so yes, sir, what does this say?
My question would be for clarity. Now that we are embarked on TMI, total member involvement, which tool is it that one would use in order to identify those whose hearts are touched by Christ?
Okay, so you're asking, we've got total member is an initiative by the General Conference. Okay? And the question is, what tools do we have to actually identify those whose hearts Christ has touched? That's your question?
Yes.
Okay, so do you mind if we unpack that over the course of this week? That's a brilliant question. Okay, I want to ask you another question. What is the heaven appointed purpose? Okay? There's several parts to this. She says such an aim. What kind of aim? This is a definite aim that we need to do what with? We need to keep it steadily in our minds if we want to have success. Okay, such an aim is set before who? This is from the book Education. Okay? And it's in the book called The Life Work, and it's under the section, This One Thing I Do. Are you with me? Okay? It's said before the youth today. Now, they have an appointed purpose. Okay? Like you said, if this is true, if we really believe this is the heaven-appointed purpose, then we better stop and listen, right? Because here's the deal, if that's the heaven-appointed purpose and it's not my purpose, then I want to tell you something. We cannot expect the support of heaven in our work if our work isn't aligned with heaven's purpose. Like we can be busy, and all that busyness is not focused around the single-minded purpose of heaven, and then you wonder why you don't feel God's support and blessing in all of your busyness. Are you with me? Okay, so what is this? They have an appointed purpose. Of what? Of giving the gospel. Now we talk about this. We talk about this as evangelism in a broad sense. I'm going to suggest that the mechanism for delivering evangelism, just to make it very practical, is discipleship. Because you see, I'm going to unpack this a little more, but because the three angels' messages define the identity and mission of the church, we've come to believe that our purpose in evangelism is to get a message out. So let's get it out. We're gonna write it up. We're gonna put it on the radio. We're gonna preach it from the front. But here's the deal, friends. Jesus did not come to give us a message. He didn't. He did not come to give a message. If he did, he would have written a book. You understand? Jesus didn't write a book. He didn't write one thing. What did Jesus leave behind? He left disciples behind. And the disciples were the ones who wrote the books and traveled the world and healed people and did everything and did more than what Jesus had done. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the mechanism, and I'm just saying this is Jesus' method. You're looking for a method. It's not to preach. It's not to preach a message, although Jesus preached. His mechanism, the way that he did this was to make disciples. Okay, so when we think about evangelism, we need to think about discipleship as part of heaven's strategy, strategic thing that heaven does, okay? It's building people. It's not about building churches, it's about building people. People build churches. Okay? People ask me, what do you do for a living? And I tell them, I don't waste my time preaching. And I don't waste my time teaching. My job is to teach teachers. Are you following me? So the reason, I'll tell you honestly, the reason I'm willing to take a little bit of my life out of my busy schedule and come spend time with you is because I believe every one of you is a multiplier. I've only got so much life to live. Why waste my time just talking to people who want to be entertained? You understand what I'm saying? So I'm talking to you because I know you're going to take this and you're going to do something with it. You're going to teach others what I'm sharing with you. Does it make sense? Okay, so they have an appointed purpose of what? Of giving the gospel to what? To the world. Okay, nice. Let's give the gospel to the world. Okay? And we're going to do that little thing. But there's a timeline. What is it? What does that mean? What's a generation? Do you know what's a generation? The heaven-appointed purpose of giving the gospel. This is Ellen White speaking, and this is the heaven-appointed purpose. And the heaven-appointed purpose is what? There's a sense of urgency, right? To give the gospel what? To the world in what? What timeline? In this generation. Okay, are you with me? Now, let's just say this. Your job is not to take it to the whole world because you've got a certain jurisdiction. Let's just say the Northern Conference. Let's just say you're part of the puzzle because you're part of a world church and everyone's at work, and so you don't have to think about 7 billion people necessarily, although I'm going to challenge you on that. But let's just say the Northern Conference. South Africa, there's other people dealing with, the other territory. So this is your territory. What's the total population of the Northern Conference in terms of gross numbers? Help me out. How many people live in the Northern Conference? How many bodies in the Northern Conference? How many? Google, come on. Ask Google if you don't know. Only about 25 million? Is that about right? 25 million? That's too much? It's right? Pastor Monet, is he here? How many people? Huh? 25 million. Are we going to just go with 25? Let's do that. Okay, 25? Okay. So 25 is about right. Okay, how many Seventh-day Adventists do we have in the Northern Conference? How many? So now we're excluding TOC? So why don't we be generous and include them? So how many members in the TOC? 4. So together it's 40? Okay. All right. And these are rough numbers, okay? And I'm just wanting to give you a challenge. Let's look at this. So now someone that's a brilliant mathematician, what I want to ask you is if this group left here saying our single-minded focus is in the next 25 years, we want everybody in the Northern Conference to have received the gospel. How much would our church need to grow per year in order to reach 25 million? What kind of membership growth would we need to have? So just do the math. In this generation, that's what we're saying, it's over 25 years. In this generation, if that was our single-minded purpose, is that right? Are you with me? So let me ask you, has this ever crossed your mind? Or is this preposterous? Is this like outrageous? If this were to happen, it would be miraculous. Okay? Now, either heaven's smoking drugs, or we're not thinking big enough. Am I just talking rubbish? What is your honest response? Yes.
You were saying taking the gospel to people, not actually baptizing people, right?
They have an appointed purpose of giving the gospel to the world in this generation. So we could think of this as just making sure that everyone at least gets that everyone in the Northern Conference at least gets a great controversy. We could look at it like that, right? We could at least put the piece of literature in their hand and then consider that done. Would you? Is that what you're suggesting, or?
Yes, I'm saying it is then in like giving the great controversy, not in actually baptizing people. Because I think when we talk in those terms, we can't do a million if it's just giving a book.
So what I want to challenge is, could it be that our assumptions about evangelism are what's limiting our vision? By the end of this week, I want to challenge that. That's what I want to challenge, okay? And is our goal baptism? Or is our goal multipliers? All right, that's another thing I want to challenge by the end of this week. Yes, sir?
If the early rain fell, there was about 120 in the upper room.
Yes?
Let's say there were only 120 Christians at the time.
Right?
Their ratio at that time was, for the world, 1 believer for every 1.4 million.
Yes?
Okay? And Paul says that in his time, the gospel was preached to everyone. So that's the early rain. In Joel, we read that the latter rain will be more powerful and mightier than the early rain. So we can definitely expect God to use us in this time to do such a great work as even more than a million.
So let me just say this. Yeah, please.
Now, if each of that 16,000 reaches one person and that person reaches one person, so proliferation, in 9 years we would have reached 30 million.
Can you hear that? If every member was trained and equipped and effective at reaching one person, with 60,000 members in the Northern Conference, in 9 years, you'd reach 30 million. So my point is simply this. We're thinking wrong about our members and about evangelism. As long as we think about evangelism as something that professionals do, we're the ones killing the work. As long as our members' role is to support us in our role of standing up and preaching, we're limiting the work of God. That's the same thinking as the budget being the 2% I give to the church. Let me tell you something. My wife and I give generously to our local church, but that's a very small percentage of the total amount of money that we earn. I'm telling you that. It's a small percentage. And if Jesus has every part of me, then you know what the result is? Every dollar that I earn is actually mission money. Every dollar. How many hours a week do I spend in my local church? And I go to the Pioneer Memorial Church. I spend maybe 3 hours a week in that building. You know where I spend the rest of my life? I spend the rest of my life outside of the church. That's the church. And the question is, what are you doing to equip me to be a multiplier? To have this single-minded focus to my life. Are you following? That's your job. Your job is not to stand up and preach, although you're going to do that from time to time. Your job is to train me to be a multiplier, to have this purpose. Now, I want to, what's the time? Okay, I want to share with you, can I have just 2 more minutes? Okay, I want to share with you, do you guys know Elon Musk? So what is, if I just say Elon Musk to you, what comes to mind? Tesla, yes, what else? SpaceX, what else? The Boring Company. As a South African, right? His dad lives here in Transvaal, right? He lives up here in the Gauteng area somewhere. This is where he grew up. Okay, he's one of us. Inspiration. Let me ask you, what is Elon Musk? If we were now it's playing up for us. If we were to say, what is his definite aim? What is it? Getting to Mars is a subset of. He's got two definite aims, and if you talk to him, he's very clear on his aims. What is it? He wants us to be a multi. He believes in order for the survival of humanity, we need to be multi-planetary race. That's number one. And what's the other thing? It's sustainable energy. It's sustainable energy. So it's not electric cars, it's a whole system. He's thinking we need to build a whole system that takes us away from fossil fuels to sustainable energy. Those are the two things that are his definite aim. That's the thing that he's giving everything to. As a matter of fact, you listen to him speaking, he's willing to go bankrupt in the process of doing that. Okay? He's willing to sell out in order to do that. So his purpose is to save the planet. That's his purpose. And that's why people are lining up in long lines. It's almost, you've got a cult following of Elon Musk. Right? Because, and the thing is, this guy is pulling off innovation after innovation after innovation. Like he's this, people are talking about it in the business industry. They're talking about it in the business industry because very rarely do you find people that are this disruptive to the way business gets done. Okay, so I want to share two things with you. This is Ellen White, and this is Elon Musk. Because I think it's important to reason from first principles. Now, only smart people can see what it says out there. Is it cable? Is it my connection here? It's Apple. Oh, you have that conversation going here too. Okay, I think it's important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. I want you to follow this line of thinking, okay? The normal way we conduct our lives is by reasoning by analogy. We are doing this because it's like something else that was done. Or it's like what other people are doing. With first principles, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths and then reason up from there. Are you with me? Yes. So if we're just gonna kind of float along like everyone else, we're just gonna borrow what everyone else is doing and just adapt it just a little bit to our situation. We're just gonna float along. If you want to be disruptive, then you need to start reasoning from first principles. Now, I want to just tell you something. If you study Ellen White, that's what this woman did. People would argue about issues, and she'd go back to the first principles. That's why she was always down the middle of the line. Whatever the issues were, she was right on target. Why? Because she had ability to reason like this. There's another quote, I'm not going to share with you now, but Ellen White says that we need to be thinkers and doers rather than reflectors of other men's thoughts. Do you know what that means to be a thinker and a doer? It needs to be someone who reasons from what? First principles. And so the question is, if you're going to reach 1 million people a year, if you're really going to believe that that's something that God to do, how would you reason from first principles rather than by analogy? Are you with me? Are you following? You're trying to follow. So let me see if I can make this clear. All right. How do we reach everybody? Well, we're going to have to take our current evangelism and do it much bigger. Or do we need to develop a whole new way of doing evangelism? Do you understand what I'm saying? What are the principles? Now, let me just share one other thing on this, and then I'm going to share a video, then I'll stop. I was watching an interview with Elon Musk, and they asked him, how do you hire people consistently that help you to be this disruptive? And this is what he said. He says it's easy. He says, I ask them to tell me about their life. And they tell me their life story. And then I ask them, then I ask them, and he's pointing over there, and I'm like, what's it? And it's just reaching over there. Then I ask them a second question. I say, tell me the biggest problem you've ever solved. This was what struck me. He said, most people reason 2 layers down and then become very vague. People who are disruptive can explain how they solved complex problems all the way down to physics. Are you following along? They can explain down to the level of nuts and bolts how they solved a complex problem. So most of us are lazy in our thinking. We look at that and we say, that's impossible. Okay, let's just go and I'm going to do my little work. I'm overwhelmed already. Rather than stepping back and saying, how do we break this down to the level of physics. So with that kind of thinking, you think, I want to send people to Mars. How do we do that? Well, I might have to might have to build my own rocket company, because the thing that's getting in the way of sending people to Mars is the expense. And so in order to bring down the expense, I have to invent a rocket that you can reuse over and over again. And then how do you build a rocket? Well, you're going to have to break it down to all of its components so that it's that reliable to do that. Are you following me? Now, if you believe you've got to put someone on Mars in order to save the planet, then you do that kind of thinking. How much more should we be thinking like that? And who's paid full time to think like that? Who is it in this conference? It's us. It's the president, right? It's us. It's our job. That's our job, to be thinking like that. Okay, so let me end with this. And I hope that this sound, if it's not, does not someone know how to adjust it in the back? Or I don't know how. I want to play sound. Because if it doesn't play automatically, I might have to just borrow 2 more minutes and plug in, because I've got sound here. So let's just try. Nope. But the sound's coming from here. Did you hear it over the top? Okay, we're gonna switch our game here. We're gonna think from first principles. Yeah? I don't think that works, because if you have HDMI in, then it tells the computer to send the sound through the HDMI. Okay, we can try. But wait a second. Okay, now you can turn up the sound over there, because this sound is coming in from here into here. Okay, so we need to turn up the sound just a little bit more. So I want you to take just a minute to discuss this in your groups. This is an interview with Elon Musk, asking about what does it take to start a new business that's disruptive, okay? Which is our business. So here's the question I want you to discuss, just 2 minutes after we're done, and then we'll be done. What does this teach you about your business as a pastor, okay, and about evangelism? Okay, listen up.
Generally, starting a business, I'd say number one is have a high pain threshold. That's it. There's a friend of mine who's got a good saying, which is that starting a company is like eating glasses and learning to be a biz. Okay, that's generally what happens. Because when you first start a company, there's lots of optimism, and things are great. And then so happiness at first is high. Then you encounter all sorts of issues, and happiness will steadily decline, and then you'll go through a whole world of hurt. And eventually, if you succeed, and in most cases you will not succeed, and Tesla almost didn't succeed, came very close to failure. Then if you succeed, then after a long time, you were finally back to happiness. I'm serious, you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing is a great product or service there.
Okay, so what's the first principle he talks about? If you want to be disruptive, what have you got to have? High pain threshold. What does that mean? You have to be resilient. As a matter of fact, someone asked him, where do you get your inspiration from? And this is what he said. I was blown away. He said, if you need inspiration, don't start a business. Now, let me just say this. I want to say this in the context. Pastors are notorious for whining. Let me just thank you. If you're starting up a business, welcome like life is hard. If your members aren't involved, welcome to the club. If you're having financial issues, welcome to the club. This is any entrepreneur that's starting new work. It's you. He said, listen, if you want to succeed, there's two things you got to embrace. Number one, chewing glass. Did you hear that? It's like chewing glass and looking into the abyss. You know what that means? Chewing glass is doing something that you'd rather not do for anything in the world, and looking in the abyss is realizing that if you make a false step, you're dead. Now, if he's willing to do that to save the planet, he's misguided. Look, we know it's all going to burn, right? And we're not going to be a multiplanetary species. That's not in the biblical picture. Okay, it's just not going to happen. So who has the real solution to this planet? Who's carrying the message? Are you following me? It's not electric cars and a mission to Mars. It's actually Jesus himself is going to make us a multi-planetary. We've got another spaceship that's coming to us. We're not going to be building our spaceship. This is Babel versus the gospel. You understand what I'm saying? So who needs to be carrying this mission more urgently than anyone else and doing it more effectively? Who needs to be willing to chew glass and look into the abyss? Okay? Now, this is the second point about conversion. Okay? If you want to introduce a new product into a system, listen carefully.
It has to be really great. But I go back to what I was saying earlier, where if you're a new company, unless it's like some new industry or new market that if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to the standard is lower before your product sells. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can be a little bit better, because then you put yourself into the shoes of the consumer, and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times, entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better.
Okay, so if you want to compete against powerful and entrenched competitors, what do you have to do? You have to have a product that's not a little bit better, but is much better. Now, here's what I want to say, and I want to say this. This is not being facetious. The problem with evangelism is that our advertising is much better than the product we actually deliver. You stand up and bring people, say, please bring people to the church. You spend lots of money to get people, whether it's advertising or whatever, and you're going to have an evangelistic series. And here's what you're going to say to them. You join our church. Your life and the Adventist lifestyle, your life will be much better if you become an Adventist, and you have the promise of eternal life. That's the advertising. My question is, are you equipped to deliver your promise? Because here's the deal. If you deliver the promise on evangelism, then your product will sell itself. Are you following me? We're promising in evangelism that people will have abundant life if they come to our church. That's the promise we're making. The problem is, when you have massive apostasy or massive, in the business world, it's called buyer's regret. That means people buy a product and it's actually not as good as the advertising. That's when people come to our church, buy the message we're telling them, and then they leave. Why do they leave? Because the product that they actually experience is not as good as we promised when we did evangelism. And here's the reason. Think of this from a leadership perspective. We've got very efficient mechanisms to do advertising, but very poor mechanisms to deliver the life we're promising them. Are you following me? Okay? So here's the deal. It has to be multiple times better in order for people to convert. Listen carefully. People are not going to leave Islam and become Adventists unless Adventism is multiple times better than Islam. You're not going to ever get in. Never, ever, ever, ever. You'll never make it an inroad unless they perceive it's multiple times better.
Does that mean that we don't practice what we preach?
I would say absolutely. Just take this. Adventism has, I said this here before, but it's provocative, so I'm going to say it again. Adventism has a health message, but many of us are not healthy. I rest my case. Right? And I'm not just talking about eating a vegan diet. I'm talking about being strong and fit and healthy and holistically, like we're much stronger and healthier and clearer than our competitors. That's actually what we're delivering. So you see, we have a message, but we don't have the life. And that's our problem. So the question is, if you're thinking at first principles, how do we deliver the message that we're actually giving it through evangelism? It's through discipleship.
Because even further than that is that we want to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and we don't know Jesus himself.
So we want to talk about Jesus, and we can do that as professionals, but without our hearts being touched by him, then it's an empty message. Okay, and that's one thing when we institutionalize evangelism, that the heart of it's missing. Okay, sorry, so that's an important point. Last one.
Number 3, I'd say, is constantly seek criticism.
Third point.
A well thought out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. And you should seek that from everyone you can, particularly your friends. Usually, your friends know what's wrong, but they don't just want to tell you because they don't want to hurt you. So they'll say, oh, I want to encourage my friends. I'm not going to tell you what is wrong with this guy. It doesn't mean your friends are right, but very often they are right. And you at least want to listen very carefully to what they say. And to everyone, you're looking for, basically, you should take the approach that you're wrong. That you, the entrepreneur, are wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong.
Okay, we'll just end with this. What's the message there?
Assume that you're wrong.
Okay. So, and we're not talking theologically here. What we're talking about is methodologically. Let's assume that we're wrong and we want to be less wrong. And if we're wrong, think about what's the results that we're getting. Are we happy with the results? Could they be better? Okay, and he says we need to do what? We need to seek active criticism from people around us. How can we improve? What needs to change in our thinking? Is there something about how we're doing business that we need to change in order for us to be more disruptive so that we can come closer to reaching 1 million people a year? Are you following me? Everyone with me? Okay, have I stirred up your pure minds? Not at all? Okay, I don't be too provocative here. All right. Why don't we, I'm borrowing your time here, sorry about that. We'll pick up this afternoon from this point, okay? So when we get back for the next session that I'm with you, if you can gather in these same groups, would you mind? And we'll start from there. Thank you very much.